Okay, hi everyone. So I want to go through some audio directions for paper two and speech two since we missed out in class today because of our snow day. So our second paper is going to be 5 to 6 pages double space with headings, and our speech will be 8 to 10 minutes long, which will be very easy for a lot of you because you like to talk anyway, so that's totally fine. But we're going to do it all on Canvas this time where we'll comment. So we won't do any live speeches in class. We'll be doing some other things in our class period. So all of our speeches for this one, speech two, will be on Canvas, and you can upload them through YouTube. We can upload them through other media sites, and we'll practice with that. In terms of our timeline for this one, you can see that I broke everything down to make sure you have enough time with this. So your topics will be due on the 24th by 10 p.m. Your potential outside resource is due on the 26th, and these are just drafts of those. A draft for peer review on the 27th before break, and then a final draft on March 9th. And I know some people are traveling for spring break with the service trips or the other academic trips, so we can be a little flexible with this date if there are any big issues or if we run into any problems. But we'll try to adhere to these for now just so we don't get too far behind or anything like that. Rough drafts for our speech will go online. And again, we're not putting all of our speech in a rough draft. But like we did last time, I thought it was really successful to have you post a part of your speech or a section that you were stuck or working on. We'll do that on February 28th. And then final speeches will be uploaded by March 10th. So we still have quite a bit of time to work on them too. Now for this paper, I'll go down a little bit and talk, keeping in line with our theme this semester, we're looking particularly in this unit at how identity and pop culture, are related, is shaped, informed, and so many other areas that come out of that in terms to analyze for our writing. So, of course, popular culture is literally the culture of the people. It's everything that goes on around us. The texts that we've talked about this semester and that we've looked at include the various advertisements, fiction, graphic novels, TV, film, of course, music and magazines, video games, internet sites, and of course, social media and the apps that fit in that category. We become so immersed in pop culture that I think it becomes very second nature to us. We do it unthinkingly. We don't think about the effects sometimes. If you think about when we watched our Super Bowl ads, we didn't even realize some of the effects that those advertisements had on us until we actually broke them down and talked about them together. So think as a whole, this act, it really does a whole lot to society in that way. So we definitely owe it to ourselves to understand how pop culture works on us. We absolutely should consider what values are being promoted, what values are privileged, what are absolutely being marginalized or put off to the side. And a big goal of education, a big goal of why we're looking at this in our class is I want to make you more aware as a consumer of the material and as someone who is surrounded by culture and a diverse culture, which is a big positive attribute. So we do this by analyzing how it works, and then we make judgments on its value and its merit. And we're going to learn to evaluate this material even more. So, of course, with all these wide variety of texts that we've looked at and that we will look at, we think about the ways that they portray groups, various race and ethnicities, gender roles, and of course, in many more different ways too. Sexual orientation. We think about how identity is structured through the working class. We think about how sometimes, I always think about too how, for example, on TV shows and movies, how like smart kids are portrayed, and they're always seen as sort of like these very stiff sort of geniuses. These are all stereotypes. These are all portrayals that, while sometimes they might be funny, they're often not funny. And maybe we laugh for a little bit, but it isn't until later on that we think about the implications of what these stereotypes actually mean. So sometimes portrayals just merely perpetuate certain stereotypes. They don't do any sort of harm, they just kind of put them out there. And in doing so, they color, they shape our views. Sometimes they have zero effect on us. We just go about our day. But a lot of times these stereotypes, and even if they're intended to be harmless, they rarely are. And they can lead to a lot of serious conversations, allegations, and consequences that come after that too. So in turn, we don't do anything to stop stereotypes. And that's a big problem. It's absolutely up to us to stop these notions of people and things from spreading. So, for this paper and speech, your goal is to examine and research and critique and analyze stereotypes in pop culture. So, as we've talked about, identity is so very connected to how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive each other, how we think about our place in culture, where we're at, who we are. So, we're going to continue to read and talk about how our identities are shaped. But I want you to think about the implications, the dangers that come along with these stereotypes in media and culture. Just for this week, we are reading our article on blackface, which has been perpetrated and absolutely used in so many different contexts when it need not be there. It's been displayed. Need I not talk about the prevalence of blackface in costumes and why people think there is no problem with what they're doing or they don't see the heavier issues that come with it. So it's your job to sort of break these stigmas. And think about these dangers. Your thesis, your argument may revolve around one of these. You can seek to prove a larger point about changing a stereotype. You might offer some solutions, or perhaps, and there are some solutions that might be present already. Not everyone is an offender of, keeping stereotypes going on. You also might want to look at the history of where some of these stereotypes have stemmed from. It's up to you. You can pick one or two stereotypes that you find prevalent in the media. And when I'm talking about media, you can look at all these different forms of text I mentioned, if not more. So, between looking at advertisements, fiction, film, TV, music, magazines, social media, whatever you want to look at, you absolutely can look at to make sure how that kind of gives you an idea of where you want to look from. I've listed right here below some super broad topics, but maybe if you don't want to, or if nothing's popping into your mind, you might want to start researching with some of these. Your goal for this paper is to include at least 3 to 4 scholarly outside sources to help you prove your point. Like I said, you can focus on one medium. You can just focus on film. You could just focus on TV. You can just focus on an ad, or you can use a couple to draw in your analysis. So of course, there's many different types of racial stereotypes that come up in our country. You can look at it from one of the different groups represented, either in film, TV, music, and so forth. For example, there was most recently, I'll use this for an example, the movie, I could be saying wrong, Crazy Rich Asians, which ended up being really popular, best-selling, and it does a good job of sort of putting at bay some of those stereotypes, but also making sort of comedic action out of them. You could take a text like that, for example, and look at. But of course, you can take a harder issue that we're discussing this week, like blackface, and kind of do that. How different groups are portrayed, for example, why are Latino or Latina men and women, children always portrayed in a certain way on TV or in movies, How are immigrants portrayed on TV, movies, etc.? That's just one area that you can look at too. Of course, African Americans and culture, not every single person falls into all these different stereotypes that come up. Oh, well, if you're African American, you must be this. If you're Asian, you must be this. These are just things that we have kept repeated through history. The show Blackish, which some of you used in your first paper, does a great job of helping to destigmatize. That's just like one example that you can look at too. There's a lot of different gender stereotypes that come up, of course, need I say, in the ways that women are presented on TV and in film. They must always be the homemaker, or very rarely they have to fall into these very mom stereotypes. But if a woman doesn't want kids or doesn't have a family, she's often secluded. Likewise, if a man stays home and he's the person taking care of the kids or the family or the homestead in that way, there's a lot of stereotypes that go into that. Of course, stereotypes with gender identity, LGBTQ issues that come up. You could look at gender roles in childhood, how boys and girls are sort of steered towards playing and looking and being with certain toys and role models and figurines. You can look at gender equity, how well males, females, of course, but not only males and females. You can also look at gender equity in the terms of how LGBTQ people are created looking into how not only we've created these perceptions about each other, but how maybe men, women, other individuals are treated in the workplace or any kind of stereotype that comes out of that. So equity is everybody given equal opportunity. Of course, that doesn't always happen. You might look at Native American stereotypes in film and culture. That's a huge area. And even in print media or the fashion industry. I should have put absolutely, you can look at the fashion industry for a lot of these topics too. How prisons or offenders are portrayed in media, how is crime portrayed and displayed. There's a lot of shows and a lot of film that can showcase this too. Of course, Muslim or Middle Eastern stereotypes in pop culture. And along with that, rural America, how rural America is often portrayed, how the working class is portrayed, and kind of how we put all these together. Again, these are just a few areas. I would love if you, and they're very broad too. You're going to have to make them so much more specific to get a good researchable topic down. So I encourage you read through. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to put a podcast and some other materials up on our page as well to help you kind of think about the notion of stereotypes and culture a little bit more. And of course, some of our readings are going to revolve around this too. So I'm excited to get into this, and I really look forward to hearing what you have to say about these topics as well.